Nintendo has purchased a big studio, Next Level Games, in a move that could lead to some interesting things in the future that I definitely want to go over. And stop me if you've heard this one before, but the Nintendo Switch Pro rumors have started for 2021 already. So let's talk about what's being said and ultimately what I think about it. What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games. So one thing that Nintendo doesn't ever really seem to do when it comes to third-party studios is, well, just buy them out. They seem to have really good working relationships with a variety of studios that of course goes back into the Super Nintendo or even the N64 era. Companies like Rare seem like a company that would always be with Nintendo, and then of course Microsoft came along and purchased Rare. Now what Microsoft did with Rare wasn't quite that same sort of magic that we saw on the N64, so I don't necessarily think studio purchases are indicative of products that will come out of those studios, but it's always sort of a heartbreaking situation to see Nintendo lose a really close partner. And one partner that Nintendo has been really close with over the past decade plus is of course Next Level Games. Next Level Games is of course known for games like Super Mario Strikers on the GameCube, Punch-Out on the Wii, and more recently Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Nintendo Switch. Now Luigi's Mansion 3 is a pinnacle of Nintendo Switch gaming, I feel. It looks absolutely fantastic. I would say it's one of the top 5 games in terms of visuals on the Nintendo Switch, so Next Level Games isn't necessarily a slouch of a company. Now yes, they did release some questionable things such as Metroid Prime Federation Force on the Nintendo 3DS, but I mean realistically, nobody has a perfect record when it comes to releasing games. Now, many have considered Next Level Games to be sort of a second-party partner for Nintendo and almost like a first-party studio, but that's not necessarily the case because, of course, when Next Level Games first came to the marketplace, they were doing third-party games for a variety of platforms. Games like NHL Hits, which was a fun sort of arcade-style game that was done in the hockey universe, and more recently, Captain America Super Soldier on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. But now Nintendo has confirmed that they have purchased Next Level Games and they are now an official first-party Nintendo studio. And I think that's very interesting when you look at sort of how the landscape of video games is going on right now, because I feel like a lot of companies are going to find themselves in a bit of a bidding war. Obviously, Microsoft is purchasing studios left and right. They seem to just have unlimited capital to throw around to purchase companies like Bethesda and id Software. I mean, those are huge third-party companies, obviously dwarfing the size of someone like Next Level Games. So if Microsoft is out here purchasing all these studios up, Nintendo and by extension Sony are definitely wise to be looking at what studios do a lot of good work for them in order to sort of, try to build a stronger relationship than is already in place. Now, could we see games like Super Mario Strikers come to the Nintendo Switch? I mean, I think it's weird that we haven't had a real Mario themed sports game in quite a while, and Super Mario Strikers was ridiculously fun on the GameCube. Like, if you have not played that game, you definitely really need to. Of course, Nintendo has trusted Next Level Games with big important IPs such as Punch-Out on the Wii and Luigi's Mansion on the Nintendo Switch. So I think this is a good relationship all around, and hopefully this sort of leads to more production from Next Level Games. When you look at their game library of things that they have released over the past 15 years or so, it's definitely a bit spotty. They go through a lot of quiet periods like you see with a company like Retro Studios, of course. So I do hope that Nintendo's additional added capital into this company and the fact that they now own it will really start to showcase what Next Level Games is capable of, because this is obviously a Western developer. They are of course based out of Canada in the Vancouver region, so I think the more Western studios that Nintendo picks up bodes good for the future, because there's a lot of Western players that play Nintendo games. Not everything needs to be a Nintendo of Japan production. You need to start to let the reins off and let some of these companies that you own or companies that you work with very regularly, let them take on some of your IPs and sort of give it a new bit of flair and a new bit of pizzazz. So all in all though, I'm definitely very excited for this purchase, and I do think it bodes well for the future of Nintendo and Next Level Games. Like I said, I do hope that Next Level Games sort of gets the reins on some more products and more productions for Nintendo games, and I do hope that this additional capital that they now have coming into the company really lets them just sort of explore different things and lets them do some really fun and creative things on the Nintendo Switch. So let me know what you think of Next Level Games' acquisition in the comment section down below. Do you think this is a big deal? Do you think this is sort of, a reactionary measure due to what Microsoft is doing by purchasing all these companies? Or do you think the timing of this is just completely random? Because I don't really know. I guess it could go either way, but I don't think that Next Level Studios is a company that a lot of companies aren't looking at, because when you look at their game production, I mean, obviously it's pretty top notch. And finally, we are a mere 5 days into 2021. The year is just starting out, and yes, we're already talking about Nintendo Switch Pro rumors. Now, in case you've been living under a rock, the Nintendo Switch Pro is something that, well, we've talked a lot about on this channel. I definitely think something is coming, a refresh of a Nintendo Switch system in potentially 2021. I think the timing of it makes sense. The Nintendo Switch is, of course, turning 4 years old on March of 2021, so it's time to start looking at things. If you want to elongate the system's life cycle, like Nintendo of Japan's president, Mr. Furukawa, said, you have to do things like do system refreshes because of the technology that is constantly moving within the video game world. The PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are already out on the marketplace, so you got to have games that at least somewhat compete, or at least look within the realm of possibility for the Nintendo Switch. But like I said, some industry analysts have now been giving their 2 cents about what to expect from Nintendo in the year of 2021. Now, this was an interview done by GamesIndustry.biz where they asked a bunch of different analysts within the video game marketplace what they expect from Nintendo in 2021, and they said the following. First off, we have to talk about Dr. Serkan Toto, who, of course, is one of the main proponents of the Nintendo Switch Pro model. He has written many articles about this that we have covered before in the past, and he told them in the interview, I predict a beefed up 4K device is coming during Nintendo's next financial year. The Nintendo Switch will be the best selling console this year as well, driven by more first-party games, the hardware refresh, and the device having developed into a lifecycle product for the mass market over the course of 2020. Now, looking at the Nintendo Switch in 2020, obviously games like Animal Crossing really sort of spurned on a whole new level of people coming into the Nintendo Switch family. Animal Crossing sold ridiculously well, and it's going to continue to sell ridiculously well, and it's bringing more people into the Nintendo Switch family of systems because they want to play games like Animal Crossing. But I think what he's trying to say here is that there's a whole nother segment of the market that maybe Nintendo hasn't tapped into yet, and that's the more higher visual fidelity people. Of course, a lot of Nintendo Switch owners, current Nintendo Switch owners, want a beefed up Nintendo Switch, and if they buy a secondary Nintendo Switch, that of course gives money into Nintendo's pocket. If this Nintendo Switch Pro is a beefed up 4K potential model, I don't think it'll be native 4K or anything like that. That's really a discussion for another video. I think it'll be, via DLSS upscaling and things like that. Software-based upscaling, which is pretty much what the future of the video game industry is going into, but that's what Dr. Toto had to say. Next up in the interview was someone by the name of Piers Harding Rolls of Empire Analysis. If I butchered your name, I'm sorry. I tried. I'm just a sweaty, greasy Italian. I don't really know what I'm doing here. But he said the following. I expect Nintendo Switch's family of devices to be the best-selling consoles again in 2021, following a very strong 2020. I currently have an updated version of the Nintendo Switch in my forecast for 2021. So once again, another analyst is saying that he feels that Nintendo is going to release a Nintendo Switch Pro or a revised Nintendo Switch model in 2021 to sort of keep up with the Joneses, which I think makes a lot of sense. Now, the third person interviewed for this segment was Matt Piscatella from the NPD Group, someone that we've talked about a lot on this channel before. He always gives us the NPD numbers, which of course tracks physical game sales and occasionally digital game sales, depending on what system it comes out in the United States, and of course hardware sales. And Matt Piscatella said the following. Despite the launch of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles, it will be the Nintendo Switch that ends up selling the most units of console hardware in 2021. This will be driven by content and promotional efforts rather than the release of a new iterative model. So Matt Piscatella doesn't really necessarily seem to be completely on board with the Nintendo Switch Pro bandwagon. He seems to think that it'll be driven by content. Obviously, we're going to see some first-party titles in the year of 2021 from Nintendo. 2020 was definitely a bit of a more quiet year for these first-party titles, and the first-party titles that we did get, such as Paper Mario, The Origami King, and of course Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, sort of just came out of completely nowhere. There were shocks that were just announced and then released a few months later. So I think he thinks that that will be the main driving factor. Promotional efforts, that pretty much means probably some sort of price cuts and things like that. Maybe the Nintendo Switch, the standard Nintendo Switch, goes down to $250 or $200, and the Nintendo Switch Lite at $150, but I don't think Nintendo would necessarily do that unless there is still a premium system on the marketplace, which sort of goes back to that Switch Pro mentality. So a lot of analysts feel that a Nintendo Switch Pro is coming in 2021. Where there's smoke, I tend to believe there's fire, and I definitely am in the camp of a Nintendo Switch Pro in 2021, and things like this just sort of reaffirm my thought process with this. But what do you think about this? Do you think a Nintendo Switch Pro is coming in 2021? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, so that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know what you think of everything in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. A lot of you guys seem to enjoy my little Giants and Eagles rant at the end of yesterday's video. So maybe I'm going to do more rants like this. Like, we need to put some respect on the New York Knicks, folks. The New York Knicks are 4-3. They have beaten the Atlanta Hawks and the Indiana Pacers, which are some of the best projected teams in the Eastern Conference. It's time to put respect on Julius Randle's game. He's really sort of crafted his game into a different way, and now he's out here playing with Coach Thibodeau, and he looks great. RJ Barrett looks great. Mitchell Robinson looks great. You have Quigley and of course Rivers coming off the bench who look phenomenal. It's time to put respect on the Knicks. The Knicks are going to the playoffs in 2021. I'm calling it right now, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.